everybody, and welcome to the CGIS Brief. This is our last CGIS Brief for the semester, but fret not, we will be returning next semester for a whole new lineup of fun discussions. As you may know, the CGIS Brief is where we talk about a random topic you never knew that you needed to know when it comes to traveling abroad. Today, I'm your moderator, Stephen Gonzalez. I'm the communication specialist for CGIS, and my pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm joined today by my lovely co-hosts.
Oh, yes, we should say our names. I thought you were going to introduce us before. My name is Callie Rouse. I am the Health and Safety Assistant at CGIS, and I use she, her, hers pronouns.
And I'm Ashton Troxel, and I'm an Intercultural Programs Advisor in CGIS, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
All right, so just like all of the other CGIS briefs, don't forget to use the chat box if you have any questions throughout the brief. I'll make sure to shout them out during the presentation, and we'll also have some time at the end where you can unmute your mic if you'd rather ask questions then. So let's jump in. Today's topic is international affairs, dating, and sex culture abroad. And we picked this topic because we know you're all thinking about it. You know, I've traveled abroad, we've all traveled abroad, and of course have dreamed about finding someone to sweep us off of our feet, and we can live and gallivant around the world. Hasn't happened quite yet for me, but I'm still hopeful. But because we know this is something on the minds of a lot of travelers, it makes perfect sense to talk about this so that you can be prepared. You can have a little bit of cultural knowledge regarding dating and sex life and how you can do all of this while being safe. So let's jump into why does it matter? Just like when any other topic we've discussed, there are cultural nuances that you should be aware of. Dating or courting can seem quite different in other countries, and it can be a huge culture shift for you. You're definitely going to want to set expectations for yourself, but like real expectations. So do you have time for this? How long is your program for? Is it a priority? Should it be a priority? What does your itinerary look like? And will you even have the time to still have a meaningful intercultural experience and date? If the answer is yes, then obviously go for it. I've come across this travel blog called The Hippie in Heels, which is written by Rachel Jones, and she actually met her husband abroad in India. And she says, when you are traveling, staying in hostels, or meeting other travelers, you already have something huge in common, a love for travel, and often that means similar lifestyles and life views. I read this and never really thought about why it is that we bond so well with people that we travel with or we meet while we're abroad. And it's because of this. It's because we're coming into contact with people, you know, despite total different backgrounds, we have similar points of views and somehow still connect on this powerful level. And honestly, to me, that sounds like great ingredients to finding love abroad. Are you in a current relationship? Should you ditch it? Maybe you're watching this and assessing whether or not to stay with your significant other. And we get that. Traveling abroad can really take its toll on a relationship, and sometimes it ends up not being worth the emotional grief. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I have come across a couple of blogs written by students who were studying abroad and maintaining a long distance relationship with their significant other. So it is possible to do that. My only reminder is that don't forget that it takes a lot of effort to maintain a long distance relationship. And you do have to put time and effort all while you're doing everything that I listed above, right? Like sightseeing, studying, interacting with your host family and friends, things like that. There's not going to be much downtime while you're abroad. So FaceTiming your significant other may not be an option most days. And there's always that time difference. So just be mindful about that. But really, what it comes down to is knowing your relationship stage and strength and talking about it with your significant other. Maybe you can pull a Ross from Friends and go on a break. I don't know. It is really obviously up to you, but definitely think about it. And then lastly, knowing how your identity plays an important role in dating abroad is important. Later in this presentation, we'll be talking about gender roles and what LGBTQ plus dating can look like, but also think about other things like race and ethnicity, religion, how will all of this, plus being in a new country that you don't know much about, impact your ability to successfully date abroad? And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Callie.
Awesome. So culture, yeah. So this is kind of the biggest thing to be thinking about when engaging in a relationship with somebody, who is from a different culture as you are. Same thing as we talked to you guys about how to, develop friendships and things like that in foreign countries and make connections with people. The same thing kind of applies when you're thinking about getting involved with somebody romantically. So one important thing with culture is the ideas of consent. So we have certain ideas of consent here in the US. We also have a certain directness. In the US, we're considered kind of like a more direct place than say like Japan or something like that, where they may be a little bit more indirect in the way they communicate things. And that can get into the ideas of consent as well. You may be more traditional or more like more used to kind of more deliberate consent of saying, yes, let's do this. Where people in the local country, maybe they kind of like talk around it and things like that. But because of those cultural differences, we do recommend that you be explicit as possible as what you do and don't want, both like in a sexual relationship, but also just like explicitly, like, what do you want out of this relationship that you're engaging in? Like, do you just want to like use this as kind of like a way to get to know people in the locals in a different way or something like that? To be explicit about what you're wanting and what you're consenting to in this relationship. And also know your boundaries and be willing to enforce them. And that kind of speaks for itself. So dating in homestays and with roommates. This is something important to think about, especially if you're in a homestay or, like I know I shared a room with a roommate, and if like the roommate had constantly brought back a boyfriend all the time, I would have been like, ugh. Like, this isn't exactly what I signed up for. I mean, I guess we have a local in our room, but like, so make sure, you establish if you can bring dates home. Also culturally, it's really important to know that sometimes there are different rules in other countries around whether it's appropriate to bring someone into your home, especially if you don't know them very well. I think we in the US are a little bit more ready to let people into our homes, where there can be people who've like known each other and been friends with each other for years, and they have not like brought them into their home because it's considered a very private space. And so you want to be really mindful of like not violating that privacy of your home, of your homestay family or your local peers that you're living with. Next slide. So flirting. The rules of flirting are also not universal. They're also cultural. So one thing to think about, even just like something we would think about not that much of in the US, smiling at people. We just kind of consider like, hey, we smile at people. That's the friendly thing to do. At least if you're from rural Midwest like I am, maybe if you're from New York, you have a different kind of cultural standard. But in some European countries, I've run into where it's really kind of weird to smile at strangers, like you don't know them. And so it kind of can be like, oh, do you want me to engage with you? Do you want me to talk to you? Like, are you interested? And so you're communicating something different than what you think you're communicating here in the US. And on the flip side of that, somebody standing really close to you or kissing you on the cheeks or something like that is very intimate and very forward to Americans. Like if someone just like came up to me and kissed my cheek, something like in a conversation, not just like randomly, but like, we're chatting and they did that at the end, I'd be like, oh, hello, you're in my space. It would be very forward for someone to do that to me, whereas it may be like super casual and be like, yeah, we're friends, whatever. And it means nothing to the locals. Also, Another thing to be considering is style of dress. This is kind of a tricky subject because here in the US, we really have very much of a cultural consideration of how you dress isn't signifying anything. We've really been moving towards that a lot. But there can be, insinuations made about the way people are dressing, that they're expecting certain kinds of interactions or wanting certain things out of, like if you go to a date and you're wearing like a really short shorts, like maybe they're considering that you're more available than you are, and that you don't want to imply that. But it can be good to know how the locals may be interpreting that, even if it's not your intention. In addition, kind of on the reverse of flirting is catcalling and street harassment. So something that's important to think about, because you really want to make sure, when is it flirting and when is it actually harassment. And I always kind of view it, it's like kind of your place to decide that. If someone says, like they're like, oh, like marry me and things like that to random women on the streets, that's probably not flirting. They're probably like just kind of harassing you. And so I would kind of follow other women's reactions to these kind of more harassing comments that you might get from locals. And really, this can be in a lot of different places around the world. I think I would think a bit more stereotypically. I've talked to people about it in Morocco and India and things like that, but it's very common in Spain and in France as well, that people are kind of like catcalling you in the streets. And my biggest recommendation of how to deal with catcalling is to follow the local women's reactions. I think that's really the safest thing to do, because it can be different depending on where you are, how you're expected to react, and what is safe to react. So if a woman like responds and says like "leave me alone" or something like that in the local language, feel free to mimic them. Absolutely. If they tend to kind of ignore them or just like, just kind of carrying on with their lives, that may be more of a safer option to do. And it may be good to just ask local women. It'll be like, what do you do in this kind of situation? It's always helpful. But yeah, important to note with this is that just because a local may not perceive something, catcalling or street harassment, or even like, like touching people in a way that you don't find appropriate, all of those kind of things, if you view it as harassment, then it's harassment. And you don't have to allow any kind of behavior that you feel is inappropriate just because it's like you're in a different culture. They're like, you still get to decide what's done with yourself and what people get to say to you. Yeah. Next slide.
What?
Oh.
Oh, before we move on, I was just thinking something we didn't cover is trying to communicate with someone and your second language, or maybe their second language, is English, and how confusing that may be. My significant other is from India, and on our like second or third date, he told me that he loved me, and that really put me off at first. But in India, that's just like, I like you. And so it was very sincere, but I took it the wrong way. So I think just communicating and asking questions really is key.
And like, even if you don't speak the same language, I wonder if it's like, obviously those nonverbal, like those expressions will certainly help you too, right? To say like, I mean, that's pretty universal, or no is pretty universal as well. So I think making sure that you're in all ways possible showing that you're uncomfortable might also help you get out of those situations.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta be overselling it. So gender roles, kind of related to catcalling, as there can be different kind of standards in other places. Gender roles can be much more rigid in the local culture than you're used to here in the US. So I think we have really pushed towards a more I can't say egalitarian. that word. We've pushed much towards that in the US, especially as of late, of, like dividing household tasks and things like that. And I know, it sometimes surprises our students when they travel abroad and they're like, yeah, my house mom did like all the cooking and cleaning. It was like really weird. Like seeing like examples of like kind of like gender roles being more strict in other locations. Well, especially if you're having a cross like opposite sex relationship, this can be really important to be considering, especially if you're thinking of a more long-term relationship with someone, getting an idea of what they think they want out of that relationship and what you think you want out of the relationship. If they expect you to do all the cooking and cleaning and you're like, I hate cooking, I want somebody who also will contribute with that alongside, then that may kind of like show you like, oh, that's not really good, well meshed. First, in some senses, men may be expected to take a lead in dating and pay her dates. It may be really rude to be like, hey, can we like split this? Like, and be like, wait, no, you're gonna cover it, right? You're the man in this relationship. You should be covering it and being like, oh, like I thought it was okay to just split it, or flip it every once in a while and things like that. In addition, your partner may have just like other ideas on the relationship, and it's good to have a kind of understanding of that prior. So LGBTQ dating. So for example, on kind of like the flip side, if you're having a relationship with the same sex or, somebody else across the LGBTQ spectrum, it's really important to be kind of gauging what are attitudes like in that country. We recommend doing that anyway, of kind of looking into what is it like in that country for those who are LGBTQ, and not only for your safety, but also for, like the safety of anybody you would get involved in. The thing with, us is that we eventually come home, from our study abroad experiences. Generally, I'm pretty sure we don't just like decide that we're just going to stay there for the most part. But you may be, with somebody who's like, I live with my family. Like I see my family all the time and they're really not okay with me being out in my relationship. And like, we can get involved with each other, but like, it's going to be a secret. And things like that. Or maybe this is your opportunity to have a, like to be out in a way you haven't been able to be abroad because you're so scrutinized back home. But you know that you're not going to be able to continue that relationship when you're going back home in your current situation. Being clear with that person that like, oh no, like this is something that I can have while I'm studying abroad, but it's not going to be able to be something that it can be really long lasting. So it can be really important to make and establish those boundaries, and also make sure you guys are doing things safely, and knowing, what is safe to do so or do in your country.
I do just want to add that, or just, just add that like being LGBTQ plus and being abroad there's just such a wide spectrum of experiences that are going to happen. I think, when I first went abroad and being a young in the closet LGBTQ plus person, it was kind of eye-opening for me. And it made me a lot more comfortable with my sexuality. I think I've read student stories that were submitted, and to them, it was quite a bit of a culture shift to have to come out again. Like they're out in the States and they're coming out again. And so I think that it's really interesting being a part of the LGBTQ plus community and being able to experience like all different types of experiences and while you're abroad.
Yeah, well said. So I'm actually going to hand it on over for Stephen to speak more on this.
All right, so I have to do a little no, I'm not muted, sorry. I have to do a little disclaimer on this. I am not the expert, and I certainly am not being paid by any of these apps or websites. I just really want to make sure you are all doing your research on these apps or any other apps that you may find on your research, so that you can make sure you find something that's comfortable for you. There is a lot of information out there when you Google international dating. So definitely, you know, do some independent research. But so I'll talk a little bit about just some of these apps. Some I had mentioned the Hippie and Heels earlier. Some of these are from her recommendation list of dating apps that she collects, and she gets all this information from mostly from people that she's met on her travels, and they tell her, oh, these are websites that I've met people. So the first one is yourtravelmates.com. That the Hippie and Heels writes that it's not technically a dating site, but many people use it as one. You can find a travel buddy on this site using filters and see who has similar interests as you do, just like any typical app here that maybe you're used to. What's unique about it is that it's its own little social media platform where you can get advice and share your travel knowledge. It's a very small community. I think they only have about 50,000 members. It's so this site isn't just for someone for you to meet someone from home to travel to. It is really to connect you when you get to this country. The Hippie and Heel said it was very much like, and it kind of took me back to couch surfing. It had very much of a couch surfing vibe to it, where you can connect with someone before your trip, and then meeting them and getting to know them while you're visiting wherever they may be. The next one is Bumble, the BFF part. That one, which I don't know if y'all know, but there is just one for like a friend setting. So when you're abroad, it'll obviously use your surrounding area to find people. So the expectation is already there that you're friends first, and maybe if you want it to be, it can turn into something more. I think Bumble is very unique for women since the app gives women all of the power in terms of making the first move too. So that might be something comfortable for you if you are a woman traveling and looking for love at the same time. Tour Bar and Flip the Trip are very similar apps slash websites. They focus. They're clearly both focused on finding a companion, and they very much are geared towards singles meeting people. So it'll do almost the same thing as your travelmates.com, where it'll use filters to help you find someone that kind of matches the same interests as you. And they all try to focus on getting people to meet locals in the area that you're traveling to so that you can get a more authentic experience and maybe finding love along the way. Happy Pancake I came across is specifically for Sweden and Finland. So it's like their own Tinder, basically. So if you know Tinder, that should be an easy one for you to pick up, but it's very popular. Hinge is also unique. I think Hinge's like motto is the app that's, oh, help me out, guys. It's like the app that's meant to be deleted. It's like something like that, because they're so sure that they're going to help you find someone that is your exact match. And I personally put Hinge there because I think Hinge does have a unique algorithm that allows you to meet people with similar interests. Scout is also an app, and it's exactly like Tinder or Grindr. Like it's gonna find someone within like 100 miles from you or something, and then it's like a quick connection. And then Tinder, of course. If Tinder is, I feel like everyone has Tinder is like probably the app of America, but it's also very popular in other places, like Europe. It's very popular in Europe. But I found that this app called Badoo is equally, if not more popular than Tinder in Europe and in some parts of like Northern Africa too. They are fastly growing, so definitely look into that. And then of course Grindr, which is an LGBTQ plus only app. That one will also just find people within your within your area. But also, I think like what Grindr and Tinder are doing that I'm not sure if any other apps are doing is they're giving you an opportunity to see globally. So if you wanted to, like if you knew that you were studying abroad or traveling somewhere, in advance, you could look first, like you could look in that area to see who, who's around that area that you're going to be in. You do have to pay a fee though, and it's not, I don't think it's affordable. So that's definitely up to you. That's your, I'll let you choose where to go from there. But yes, there's a ton more out there. So just, take a look.
I don't know if we mentioned this a little bit later on again, but with like kind of like Grindr in particular, I know there have been some issues with safety related to it. It can be mindful, or might want to be mindful if you're going to countries that are really conservative and kind of more have a kind of a homophobic policy as a government. That their apps like Grindr have been used to kind of like track people and like find out if they are gay. So it can be a little bit more of something to be cautious of in a more conservative country.
That is a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, and which is what I was trying to get to at the very beginning of this slide. Like, please do your, your research, because yeah, you don't want to be stuck in a situation like that where the government is monitoring you.
Well, perfect segue into some safety tips. And many of these, like, you can practice no matter where you are in the world, whether it's Ann Arbor or Paris or Seoul. So obviously, when you meet someone for the first time or you're going on a date, you want to have your roommate or someone know where you are. And I think what's great about technology and the fact that we have phones is you can share your location, which is really helpful. I think when you go out to bars or nightclubs, just maybe designating one of your friends to be the sober sister. That's what we did when I was in college. We all took turns being sober sister. That person drove and made sure everyone got home safe. And I think it just gave everyone peace of mind. So definitely like find a strong group of friends that you can trust. And then like getting home safely is really important if you have to ride the bus or take a taxi. In some countries, once the sun goes down, it's not safe. So definitely talking to locals. Maybe if you have like a orientation when you get on site or you're staying with the host family, they can let you know how to navigate at nighttime. So that's something you just want to think about before you even go out. And then the last one I wanted to point out is setting boundaries for yourself. I think, when I was 19 or 21, I wasn't thinking, okay, I'm just going to drink 3 drinks tonight, because once I go over that, it gets too out of hand. So I think when you're in a country, in a situation that you're not familiar with, that's going to be even more important, so you don't find yourself in a bad situation. And then setting up some boundaries of how far you're willing to go sexually. Maybe you tell your friend, hey, make sure I get home alone in my bed tonight, just so you're holding each other accountable. And then some action items you can take on your health. Obviously, before you leave, during pre-departure orientation, we talk about medication a lot and making sure you bring enough for the duration of your trip, whether it's for sexual health or any sort of reason, but whether it's PrEP, birth control, condoms, just making sure you're familiar with, what you're putting in your body and you have access to it. And usually, like birth control, they may only give you like 1 month at a time, but you can work with your insurance to get enough for, 3 or 4 months while you're abroad. And then while you're abroad, it's really important to know, emergency numbers in case you do witness something or you are a victim of assault. Callie and I were just talking a little bit earlier about how difficult it is sometimes to report these things. So if you don't want to report it to the on-site staff or CGIS or local authorities, there are some confidential reporting avenues. One is your GeoBlue insurance. It does offer mental health resources. So if you go online, you can find psychologists in your area, and it's totally free, which is really great. And then SAPAC also has confidential mental health counseling if you are a victim of assault or harassment, and you're just having trouble dealing with it. But just know that CGIS and the on-site staff are here to help you, even though it's a very complex situation. And even if it's really minor, like dealing with street harassment and unwanted attention can be very mentally exhausting. So there are some ways, to navigate that so you're not thinking negatively about your host country and you can still enjoy your time abroad.
So I put a few resources here, just some that I found interesting. Dating while studying abroad, maximizing fun, minimizing heartbreak. Dating abroad, should you try travel dating sites? All of those will kind of give you a breakdown on how apps work abroad. Dating while studying abroad, a long distance semester, that was written by a student who studied abroad and maintained their long distance relationship with their significant other. I'm putting it on here because she did add like a couple of tips of what how she made it work with her significant other, which I thought were really simple but unique, and I'd never thought about it before. So there's that. And then Tinder Without Borders breaks down what dating apps look like in various countries around the world. It doesn't, there's only a few that it gives like references to certain dating apps. Like it'll talk about some dating apps that are popular in their area, but it'll kind of just give you this idea of what it might look like to study abroad and date in Egypt or in France and things like that. But there's a lot more, like I said, so just use Google. So next time on the CGIS Brief, like I said earlier, this is our last one for the fall term, but we will be back next semester, where we will be talking about bathroom culture abroad. I believe we'll be joined by our director, Michael Jordan, and that will be Thursday, January 28th at 3 p.m. And so yeah, we're just gonna talk a lot about bathrooms. What does public bathrooms look like all over the world? You'd be surprised. So definitely mark it on your calendars, and yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep, thanks.